These behaviour management tips could change your approach in just one day. If you are caring for someone else, whether paid or unpaid, and no matter how many hours you do it, did you realise that you may be missing out on thousands of pounds of discounts for things that you may use every day? The Able to Care podcast is proud to be sponsored by the UK's #1 carers card. Started by two best friends who recognise that carers deserve better and are 100% committed to helping to change the lives of all carers and bringing them together as a strong community. Carers Card UK provides support, recognition and rewards. It offers reassurance by providing an ID card that helps access emergency information when needed, while also unlocking discounts, a wellbeing hub, a carers circle tool and a community through their app. All of this for less than the price of a box of chocolates a year. There are discounts on gym membership, days out, electrical goods, clothing and even glasses. Let others know you care while taking a little care of yourself with an ID card you can be proud of. Visit carerscarduk.co.uk/promo code/able to care today to order yours. Hello and welcome to the Able to Care podcast. I'm your host, Andy Baker. And on today's podcast, I'm going to be sharing 3 simple but powerful tips for managing behaviours that challenge, that caregivers and parents or anybody can apply. So I was asked to kind of give my top 3, and these are there's so many that I'm just going to try and simplify. Now, why is it important as far as reducing distress? When we're looking at managing behaviours that challenge, and I'm very careful about my wording there, one of the things is that we need to kind of be able to manage our own distress, but also to help others manage their distress. Most of us want an easy life. And therefore, if we can kind of reduce distress, reduce emotional dysregulation, reduce confrontation, that promotes an easier life for everybody involved. And behaviour is one of the most common things that we teach within Able training, but it's one of the most common things that people have challenges with within their role, whether it be parents, whether it be teachers, whether it be caregivers, paid or unpaid, and whoever they're supporting. And it isn't just about managing behaviour of people they're looking after. It could even be partners, colleagues, Difficulty with understanding or connecting with other people is a real challenge. So let's see if I can give you these 3 simple tips or just a starting point. Number one is we're going to look at turning things positive. So one of the focuses on my book, Targeting the Positive, is about kind of getting us to recognize the skills and abilities that individuals already have that we can kind of build on and reinforce to encourage them and to build their self-esteem. Our habit, unfortunately, is we tend to catch the negative. We tend to notice when something isn't right, when something's bad, when somebody doesn't do something, when somebody acts out in a way that we perceive as negative. Now, that's understandable. That's normal human nature. And obviously I could go into, and maybe I'll do an episode sometime of going into that a little bit. Why do we do that? But it is natural that we're going to catch that negative thing, partly because it's a problem that we need to solve. It gives us something to kind of focus on. But it's also, that's where it could be dangerous or it could be detrimental or it creates a concern for us about the individual's well-being. But starting point is rather than we have a very clear idea of what we don't want them doing, but do we know what we do want them doing instead? If we understand that all behaviour is a form of communication, behaviour is a way of either meeting a need or to cope with stress. It may be a behaviour that we perceive as maladaptive, is detrimental for the individual themselves, but why are they choosing that behaviour rather than any other? And if we don't know what we would rather they were using to either meet that need or to cope with stress, well, how are necessarily they supposed to? So if I take a simple example is, let's say I haven't eaten all day and I'm hungry. So an adaptive way of meeting that need would be to go to the fridge and make myself some food. A maladaptive way of meeting that need is to steal it from somebody else. Now, if my habit is stealing food from other people, but that keeps meeting my need, that's the way it keeps working for me, then you need to look at, well, why is that the case? And what do we want him to do instead? If you haven't even got in your head, well, how can we encourage him to make his own meals? How can we encourage him to get his food using appropriate strategies? If you haven't planned that out, how are they necessarily supposed to? Okay. And that's where you need to look at adjusting the environment or approaches to actually then meet that need. Another example of that is, let's say, how can we stop him hitting? How can we stop him lashing out, whatever? And we're focused on the, maybe due to their emotions, their anger, their emotional dysregulation, they do lash out. And what the instinct is to keep asking that question, how can we stop them? The problem is when you're saying, how can we stop them? That's what you're going to focus on. That's what you're going to catch. And unfortunately, because you're catching it, you're probably accidentally reinforcing it or acknowledging it okay? So instead, how do we want him to cope with his emotions? Because if you don't know, where's your basis to kind of build a positive framework from? So my number one tip is, what do you want rather than what you don't want? How are we going to reinforce, encourage, role model the things we do want rather than the things we don't want? That's tip number one, massively important. And that comes all the way back. I think it was a very early book I read, like Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People, kind of referred to a principle of that most of us, if you want your partner to clean the kitchen for you, if you go in and go, well, you haven't done this, you haven't done that, and you haven't done the other, I'll never try and clean the kitchen for you again. If instead you go in and find the one bit you really do like and go, thank you so much for doing that, hopefully I'll try and make the rest of the kitchen look like that next time. Okay, that's the principle that's been around for a very long time, but we do often forget to do it. Tip number 2, respond rather than react. So many of us, when we're engaging or encountering a behavior that we find difficult, our instinct is to react to it in that moment. And I want people to think about a kind of a slow thinking rather than fast thinking. We respond, which is a rational response rather than an emotional reaction. Just taking, whether it be a few seconds, a few minutes, it could even be the next day, allowing us to kind of properly process, why is this making me feel this way? Why am I concerned with this? Now, it all depends on the immediate risk in that moment, but even that pause in that moment, just that breath before we go in and respond to it, can hopefully help us to de-escalate and manage the situation more carefully. An emotional reaction will tend to just produce a further emotional reaction from the other person. Calm is as contagious as fear and panic. So if we can regulate ourselves and allow ourselves to enter into a situation rationally, we've got a better chance of de-escalating. And think of it this way. How many of you have ever had an argument where, it's reached that point in the argument, you couldn't even really remember what the argument was about, and everything the other person says is wrong? Or maybe you've been emotionally distressed and somebody comes over to manage you, and have you often found they made it worse rather than better? They escalated before they de-escalated. And commonly they escalate because they react to your emotions. They personalize it. They try and problem solve it. They try telling you what you should and shouldn't do, which only makes you more annoyed. So if you know how you feel when that happens to you, you need to make sure you apply those same rules, how would I feel, over to managing other people as well. So make sure you respond rather than react. And number three, we're going to look at, to be able to do that, we must be able to be self-aware and emotionally literate. Self-care is so important. If I'm already in a heightened state of arousal, I'm already a shaken up bottle of Coke, as I go into a situation, I'm more likely to react. If I'm tired, if I'm stressed about other stuff, if I'm just generally struggling to cope myself, as I go in, I am more likely to then trigger further escalation. So the third tip is, it's so important to actually be self-aware, self-manage. And what do you do to be able to regulate your emotions? Because again, if you don't know what you do, how can you help and support and teach others to do the same thing? So those are my top 3. Now, obviously, you may be sort of saying, those aren't going to solve every problem. They don't meet the need of every situation. Human behavior is incredibly complex, and I can't just solve the answer in 3 tips. But if you apply those 3 tips, it'll make a significant difference into the interactions that you have on a day-to-day basis. Have you ever encountered an adult or child's behavior that has felt difficult, overwhelming, or challenging? Have you sometimes felt at a loss of what to do, or know that you didn't handle it quite right? People are complex and unpredictable, and their behaviour can be like the weather. We've all made the mistake of looking out the window and feeling safe to wear shorts, but 5 minutes later wishing for an umbrella. But what if, like a weatherman, you understood how humidity, temperature and pressure all come together to cause the weather, allowing you to better prepare, predict and respond, and prevent ever having a picnic ruined by a thunderstorm ever again. My book, called Targeting the Positive with Behaviours that Challenge, helps you to become the weatherman of behaviour. It provides you with a toolkit to increase competency, confidence, resilience and empathy, so you feel more assured about how to respond to distressed or dysregulated behaviours in others, including those affected by trauma, mental health, neurodiversity, learning disabilities or dementia. Build better connections, achieve de-escalation and improve outcomes for yourself and those you engage with my celebrated 6-stage target model, a step-by-step process to reduce distress for everyone. Discover my empowering, person-centered guide in Targeting the Positive, written by me, Andy Baker, available from online bookstores worldwide. Find a link in the description and order today.